Well, David Shapiro has got a lot of views, a lot of thoughts, a lot of suggestions about what is going on in the United States. And he joins us now, not least because you have family over there, David, for those who don't know.
I do. They voted. What's interesting about that Grindy story is that he was a Democrat, which was the side that backed the South. Remember that Lincoln was a Republican. So things have switched. So, and you know what's interesting about that, and what's wonderful about that story is that if we look at the number of votes, Harris might even get the popular vote. And yet, I think the hope is that, if Trump does win, that he recognizes that, as many people voted for her as for him, and that he runs the country, understanding that it wasn't a landslide in terms of that. And that's always a concern with me, is that, the winning party just tends to kind of run almost wild over the opposition and the celebrations and so on. I'm watching through my, just over my shoulder now as results come through. Republicans have taken North Carolina, and as you said in the introduction, it's still those other swing states that are on a knife edge, literally. Every vote is now counting. But I tend to agree with you. My heart is with Harris, but my head says that Trump's just going to edge her out. And that's why the markets are doing what they're doing, Alec.
Why do they like Trump so much?
I don't know. I can't understand it, because here's a man whose financial affairs are an absolute shambles. His accountant is in jail, or if not in jail, has been sentenced to jail, serving there. He's a man who's been convicted of not rape, but abuse to women. There's so many things against him, and yet that doesn't count. And, even from a religious point of view, and I don't want to bring religion in, but you would think that very religious people would follow maybe what the Old or New Testament say about, particularly the Ten Commandments. He's abused every one of them, and it doesn't matter. They change the conversation accordingly. Oh, well, as long as he's a good governor, it doesn't matter that he's a bad man. He's good for the country, So you always find that you can manipulate the story. But I think markets are, they see the rand. I saw in your introduction slide, 76. It's around about 1770 at the moment, and that's as you say, that's dollar strength. Worries about inflation, worries that Trump's policies are going to be inflationary, and that's why you watch the 10-year Treasury bonds are going up. Alec, when you look at that, and I must mention it, the 10-year there is now almost 4.5. I think it's just below that. A few months ago, that was 3.6 when Powell started to reduce interest rates. We were now on this trajectory downwards with rates coming down. So that's swung around. I mean, for bondholders, that's been chaotic. But the equity market on the other side is just roaring.
Gangbusters. Here in South Africa, David, we had a trading statement from Marion Roberts yesterday afternoon. I had a look at it. Let's get your thoughts. It seems to me almost a bit like accountants are managing this company. I won't say into the graveyard, but jeepers creepers. It's a little bit like EOH. Here was a big company. Instead of growing revenues, they're saying, well, we got to cut costs. And it's a shadow already of what it was.
It's been a disaster. This was a massive business in the construction side. We all remember, what's his name, Bruce? I can't remember his first name. He was Brian Bruce, running it. And it had so many arms. And what happened now in the latest story is that this is Venetia Diamond Mine, which is cutting back because, the diamond market has collapsed. So they had a contract there. They had a mining contract there, which is now been put on hold. They used a word that I've never seen in the English dictionary, and I'd have to look it up to explain what it said. I'm trying to look for it. I'd written it down. But, they've lost that contract, which is very important for them because they have gone the mining route. They don't call themselves a construction company anymore. But I think over the last decade or so, this is a company that's just been dragged down by very, very poor performances in the areas in which they've been operating, whether it's been in the Middle East, whether it's been in Australia, wherever it's been. It's got a market cap of $1 billion. 1 billion rand, which is nothing. I mean, that is an ultra small cap. So it's tragic to see what's happening to our construction. Alec, we discussed it the other day with PP Cement and with Sapaku. There is no construction in South Africa. And that's why these businesses are battling, and they're battling to hold on to their skills, because you can't let them go, and then you get a contract and you've got to go hunt for skills. So it really reflects what's happened to the South African economy, our construction companies and those companies right at the bottom of the, that provide the services and provide all the equipment for expansion.
Marion Roberts, wow. Who would have thought? And they had big international interests, Clough in Australia. That was the downfall to a degree of Wilson Bailey. They managed to extricate themselves, and they seem to be doing things better again, but stayed in construction. Marion Roberts taking a different view. David, what about Eltron? You and I know the late Robbie Fenter well. We both knew Bill Fenter, who's still living in Monaco and knocking around. I saw pictures. Robbie used to send me pictures of him and Bill seeing each other. They saw a lot of each other. And Eltron is just shooting the lights out. It's more than doubled the share price this year, the top performing stock on the JSE. Who would have thought?
It came under a lot of pressure. Remember when they unbundled Bytes? Bytes also had its problems in the UK. It's still a very good business. But they put their head down, and their divisions are all doing well. There are a whole lot of divisions that they're, whether it's fintech, whether it's health tech, in other words, providing, call it, what's it? Almost software new age services to these businesses. Software. If you go to a hospital now, all the equipment and all the patient records are run by these kind of companies, and they're doing well. And as you said, they've almost doubled now. So I think, we've still got those businesses here that can turn around and do well, even in a very difficult and challenging environment. But I have to congratulate you on Palantir. I mean, brilliant choice. You had the courage to go out and follow this. And this is at the forefront of AI and just benefited. Wonderful choice, Bill.
Well, the reason for Palantir is something that is going to shock many of the BizNews tribe who think that the World Economic Forum is a dreadful place and it's a globalist and they're doing horrible things. Well, if you've bought Palantir, thank the WEF, because I was at the World Economic Forum, was it 2 years ago, where I met Alex Hogg. The share price was $8. And this guy impressed the heck out of me, David. When I then started reading through the information that Palantir was doing, what they were up to, the fact that they'd spent years building 5 products that were ready for the new artificial intelligence age, but no one had kind of got it yet. And that's the consequence of those products now really, really hitting their straps. It's a bit like you and ASML. When you found ASML, I remember talking to you about that and thinking, oh, come on, Dave, really, this Dutch company, ex-Philips, what the heck are you talking about? But you'd done your homework and you shared that with anybody who'd been prepared to listen. And had we all followed you back then, well, it must be a 10-bagger by now, since you invested there.
Well, it's up in the 300-400%. Yeah, it's had a little bit of a rough year, but I think that's just temporary. They still got the technology, and they lead in technology. Palantir, that's where they're leading. They're teaching companies how to use AI and how to use all the data that they accumulate. It's useless if you don't know how to use it. And that's their skill. And small business, but you're right to watch it. There's certain companies that will lead the way, through this. AI is only in its infancy. So these are the kind of businesses. Well done.
David, I'm going to ask Ruan to actually change the running order a little bit, because we had Werner Kapp from Eltron at the end of the show. I want you to watch this. And before we watch it, because I asked him about the amazing performance of the share price this year, where the price has doubled. In fact, it's a 2-horse race. If you look at the JSE year to date, it's between Eltron and We Buy Cars. We Buy Cars nearly 100%, 98% up from their listing price, and Eltron more than 100%, including that big jump yesterday. But something to put in the back of your mind. Eltron owns Netstar. Eltron's total value is 8 billion rand. Netstar competes with CarTrack. So Netstar is about 20% of Eltron, okay? CarTrack is listed separately on the New York Stock Exchange, on NASDAQ in America, and it's worth $2 billion. So we're talking about a $34 billion business, 34 billion rand business, because the Americans appreciate CarTrack, as against an 8 billion rand business because the South Africans don't appreciate Netstar. There's a story here for us it's an ASML and perhaps a Palantir story for us to really take note of and do our own homework. But Ruan, perhaps you can just play the clip of the interview that I had yesterday with Werner Kapp, the CEO of Eltron.
You know, when I arrived at Eltron about 2 years ago, what I found was a business that I felt was underappreciated. I felt that we had great solutions that really solve real world problems for our customers and for the country. A blue chip customer list, sort of great people. And at the time, I said, folks, I feel that we're the best kept secret in the market. Why didn't I know all of that before I worked for Eltron? So I think a part of it is telling that story better to our customers. Obviously we've been executing in a fairly disciplined manner, I'd like to think, over the last 18 months on this strategy to be the leading platform and IT services company. I'm delighted that the market is rewarding that performance.
It's still very cheap, though, if you take a line through Karoo, which owns CarTrack, because you own Netstar. Now, CarTrack's pretty much their business. Netstar is one of your businesses. And Karoo is listed in America. Its market value is $2 billion, give or take 30, what's that about? Well, 30 billion rand at least. Your market value is only 8.5 billion rand. So when you compare the two, but what am I missing here? What's the difference? Is Netstar really that much smaller than CarTrack?
I think it's a good question. I mean, as you know, always difficult for a kind of CEO to comment on market capitalization or how the market values your business. Firstly, Karoo, obviously, CarTrack, very good company. We compete with them in the same market. I think that maybe part of the challenge has been historically, you talk about the market starting to appreciate the Eltron business more. I speak about it not being the best kept secret anymore. That's why we've, been quite distinct about talking about the platform side of our business and talking about the IT services part of our business. So, maybe it's an understanding issue, but it's really nice to see that the market is starting to appreciate that more.
Okay, Dave. Well, let's take away, Ruan, if you could drop the rest of that clip and just get David's thoughts on that. I remember Pitt telling us at one of the conferences, Pitt Viljoen, saying he likes Transaction Capital because of We Buy Cars. And We Buy Cars was, as we now know, was the star of that show, that shit show, as Mr. Hurwitz discussed it, or David Hurwitz described it to us at some point. But he bought Transaction Capital, and it wouldn't surprise me if Pitt isn't invested in We Buy Cars. Walter Eilert has invested heavily in We Buy Cars. He owns 5% of his clients own 5% of the whole company, and they got in at 18.50, and we're now looking at 36 rand. Maybe there's a story like that here, Dave.
In Eltron, definitely.
Yeah,
I looked, We Buy Cars, I was cynical on it. I said, who wants to buy a Jewel Street car trade, second-hand car trader? But I think the more I spoke to people who use their service, the more impressed I was with how high-tech they were and how good a service they gave. Yes, I've got a bit of egg on my face because I didn't understand the business. What Eltron, if we think about Eltron, what do we think of? Cables, engineering, we haven't adjusted our sights to what Werner has done and how he's upped those areas, as he said, the best kept secret. Because in our mind, Reunert was the same thing. Have a look at the performance of Reunert. Remember, they used to run neck and neck. Also a company that has turned itself around, repositioned itself, and doing very, very well. But I think Eltron kind of caught us by surprise. And I'm glad that, you've got this clip with Werner, because suddenly those businesses that we didn't put any kind of value on are doing well. Just one other point. If you look at Karoo and Netstar, Karoo still does most of its business here. even though it's gone to Singapore and it's on the NASDAQ, its growth predominantly is still here. It's still this market. So I don't think they've shot the lights out, and I might be, Chris Logan's going to kill me, but I mean, I don't know if they've shot the lights out in Singapore or Franco Lorenzani, who carry the flag for Karoo. I still think it's very much a local business.
It is indeed. And David Shapiro is still very much a local hero, the favorite stockbroker, South Africa's favorite stockbroker. Always good to be catching up with David.